welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen. With me today is longtime listener, poet laureate, and Taya Master Anne-Marie Young. This is your Daily Dose of Happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today. Indeed we are, as we start another week here on LOA Today. And Anne-Marie and I were chatting before the show, talking about stuff going on in life and so forth. And then Anne joined us, and one of the things that popped up was emails not getting through. And it's one of those opportunities to decide, how are we going to respond? Are we going to get upset? Are we going to laugh it off? What's going to be the deal there? And of course, as listeners probably suspect, I decided to laugh it off because it's a whole lot better than getting all upset about it. I like to attract good emails into my life, and I want to attract being able to send good emails. So, I'm going to stick with that approach today. So, Anne-Marie, I think that's my best way of setting us on the right tone today. How am I doing?
That was perfect. Well,
okay.
Good start.
Well, we're having some extra fun today because we have a special guest joining us, as we so often do. This is Anne Bell. Anne she described herself as a love coach, or a love and life coach, if you will. And she's going to tell us a little bit more about how that came to be in her mainstream of life, so to speak. But she has a kind of a different take on life coaching, and me, people, everybody who comes onto the show who has a different perspective I like. So I think I'm going to enjoy this conversation. I think both of us are going to enjoy this conversation with Anne. So Anne, welcome to the program. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Walt and Anne-Marie. Thank you for having me.
Glad to have you.
Good to have you.
Yeah. We always enjoy meeting new people, and that's what this is another opportunity to meet somebody new.
I know, it's very exciting, isn't it?
It is, yeah. It's always fun. It's interesting. I mean, I really was meaning it when I say I love new perspectives, and anytime I get a new perspective, it's a good day. So I want to learn more. Anne-Marie, I'm sure, wants to learn more about your perspective. So give us your story. How did you get into this? I mean, was there like an event that transpired that kind of kicked it off, or how did you get here?
Well, it was an evolving process. I'm a licensed massage therapist of 25 years, and I have the clientele that wants to talk on the table. They want to talk and talk and talk about their lives, their situations. And so I've done a lot of one-on-one conversations. And then I said, let me get certified. So in 2012, I decided to get certified in life coaching.
Okay. So
when the pandemic hit, I had to shutter my business. And I said to myself, this is a problem. Mm-hmm. And, I'm headed toward retirement for massage. So I said to myself, well, how would I like to enhance my life coaching? Because I'm doing it on the table. So I decided to become certified in love coaching. I'm a master sexpert, and I'm a relationship coach. So I found myself having a lot of conversations about sex. So I said to myself, there's a market here. There's a thirst. There's a quest. People want information. So I kind of stepped up, raised my hand, and say, let me try this. I'm going to do this because I do have a lot of conversations, like I said, one-on-one about sex. So I figured, let me try and go bigger with it, since everybody is so curious about the topic. So that's how I kind of got into it.
Yeah, it's not like sex has been a big topic for very long.
No, not at all. But, we're still in society, though, we're afraid to talk about it. We're still really inhibited a little bit about talking about sex. So I figured, let me be brave and let me start having conversations about it.
Does it feel brave still?
Pardon?
Does it still feel brave?
Yes. I mean, it's I'm slowly myself stepping into it in a bigger model. I don't have problem. One-on-one, I'm good. I'm solid. But now this is my first live event. So I'm like, oh my, this is really elevating myself to the next level.
Well, you can relax because 99.9% of the listeners are listening to the audio recording after the fact. We make it one or two people on the live stream. So it's not going to be a whole lot different from just recording a podcast. It's just that there's a possibility somebody might jump in and see what's going on while we're doing it here.
Okay.
But No double pun intended there.
And go back to the email being lost. I think Mercury is still in retrograde. So that's for another couple of days, or it's just about to end. So that's one of the things that Mercury in retrograde will do, is lose communication. Things will get broken. It's really, communication is a struggle. So that's why I got lost.
Okay. We've talked actually over the years a lot about Mercury in retrograde, and I kind of came to the conclusion that since Mercury is in retrograde about 40% of the time, I wasn't going to worry about it, because it doesn't do me any good to worry about it.
It's a nice excuse.
It's a nice excuse. Oh my goodness. And you have a video that's coming out soon, and this is actually going to start pushing us to the edge here of, I don't know, social acceptability, perhaps. I have no idea, but tell us a little bit about this video that's coming out.
Well, it's interesting because as a massage therapist, I would teach couples how to massage each other. I taught a couples massage class, and I thought it was really, really cool because you could watch the couples bond differently. Because they had to ask the hard questions. How does this feel? Is it too much pressure? And I would watch this instant transformation. So I never taught the more sensual side of it. It was mainly because I had other couples in the room. But this video is going to be like that. It's going to be female and male oriented. So if you're, a gay couple or a heterosexual couple, you can just, buy the woman aspect or get the man and the woman aspect. But I also want to include the erotic. How to do a penis massage, how to do a vulva massage, just not, yes, it can lead sexually, but just for relaxation purposes of what that is for your partner. So that's what's exciting about it.
I pledge I'm going to avoid every single joke that's coming to my mind right now. And that one too.
And what I'm also in, hopefully in the next couple of months, all of this will happen for people to visit and, purchase for their home, is writing a book on erotic play. What it is, how to do it safely, some guidelines, a cute little guidebook on how to, basically it's giving people permission to have better sex and how to do it.
Isn't that interesting? We need to have permission for that.
I think so. I think because we're all very inquisitive, but because of our past histories, society, religion, childhood, whatever it is, we get inhibited. And we don't always have that open communication with our partner.
Yeah. Now here in the U.S., we have the excuse of having a Puritan heritage. Have you figured out what the excuse is for the rest of the world? I haven't figured that one out yet.
I don't know. It's the craziest thing. It really is to me why people sit and suffer with this instead of exploring, asking, thinking, getting curious, use your imagination, be playful. I mean, sex is really a lot of fun.
It's the whole point. Well, not the whole point, but it's a significant part of the point. Let's put it that way.
Yes, it is. But we just get so hung up on it. And I know, I look back at my younger years, how I evolved myself. I can totally understand. We didn't talk about sex in my family. We didn't do any of that. We weren't affectionate. We didn't talk about it. So it was this thing I had to kind of figure out as I went along.
Mm.
And some of it was good information and some of it sucked.
Yeah, when I was growing up, certainly it was never a dinner table conversation. It wasn't brought up in any way within the family. The only thing I ever heard was, friends talking on a street corner, and, we all know how reliable that is.
Yeah, there's a lot of misinformation going on there.
No wonder we're confused. I mean, seriously. when you have that kind of a background, when you have that kind of experience to work with, it's amazing that, first of all, we have sex at all. And second of all, that we're actually able to procreate our societies as well as we do. And yet somehow we're able to pull it off. It's an amazing thing.
We don't always do it well. That's the problem. So, I would like people to, be able to enjoy it and talk about it more amongst themselves so they can explore with each other.
I'm not sure where I want to go on this. Anne-Marie knows this is an unusual place for me to be in, because normally I have just questions all lined up. This time I'm not. I mean, Anne-Marie, do you have any clues? First of all, do you have anything going on in your mind that you want to ask about?
No, it just makes sense because I think, like, being over in Britain, the saying used to be "no sex, please, we're British," and we never talk about it. And I think if I look back at I was thinking about, as you were talking, like, sex education at school, and it was all very clinical and. There was nothing about it being fun or pleasurable. It was just the whole mechanics. And I think that's probably why a lot of people feel such inhibition, because it's just all seems to be hounded by embarrassment. But I love that things are changing in that respect. And, I love that you've just kind of fell into this whole theme. And there's obviously a requirement for it because, we want to have fun in our lives, don't we?
Yes. And we're taking it so seriously. I just did an earlier podcast, and her and I had very similar, experiences where I think as women we give it all to our male partners, thinking they know more about our bodies than we do. And it's the funniest thing because you don't want to hurt their ego, and it's such a misnomer. They don't know more than we do. You know how your body reacts best. But it's also a matter of you have to explore it, men and women, but especially women. We have to explore. We have to know what turns us on in order for our partner to be able to do that. Which means we have to masturbate, we have to explore, what is it that turns us on? And that's the hard part.
Well, I can think there's actually a lot of challenging aspects to the whole topic and the whole process, largely because of the main point you brought up, that it doesn't get discussed.
Right.
If it was, let's turn it around. Maybe that's the way for us to carry on this conversation here. If it was being discussed, what are some of the broad outlines that would be great for people to regularly be talking about?
I think just what I talked about was, how do you get turned on physically? So I think the number one thing is you have to explore yourself. So I think masturbation is the key for a lot of it. And in order to even start that process, it's education. So what turns me on will turn you on differently. And we're all very different. So don't expect those things to happen for everybody. That's why it's so important, self-exploration, self-pleasuring. And how you do that is, you can read erotica, you can watch porn, you can, just see I like that. Oh, that's intriguing. Oh, that looks okay, but I don't think I'm ready for that yet. So it's okay for all of that. And here's the other thing that I tell, because I primarily work with women, when your partner or you is telling you what they would like to try, don't go, ooh. Don't keep it in your mind. Don't say it out loud. Even if it's uncomfortable and you're like, oh my God, and you're cringing, keep your neutral face and get inquisitive, get curious. What is it about that turns you on? What is it why you really want to try that? And I believe that's how you open the conversation with each other.
Yeah, that's good. I was also thinking, as Anne-Marie knows, as our listeners know, I've been going through a separation leading to divorce. And so I'm relearning what it is to be single after 23, 24 years. It's quite different now from what it was 23, 24 years ago. I can tell you that.
Yep.
And in the process of doing that, I decided I was so far out of touch, I needed to find some expert help. Now, we talk often here about getting coaching. So I said, okay, well, I'm going to find somebody who's an expert at dating, and I'm going to find a dating coach. So I found a female dating coach who coaches men. And I liked what she pointed out about it, that if you really want to figure out women, you don't ask another man, you ask a woman. So I said, okay, I'm going in that direction. And I learned a lot so far, just reading her material. She has courses and so forth. And, so learning about the stuff that she talks about. And she at various points does talk about sex. And one of the key points that she makes is that men and women have very, very different experiences when it comes to sex. Very different, dramatically different. And she makes the argument that some make. I know that it's a little controversial. Not everybody in the dating trade makes this argument. But she makes the argument that it comes down to what she describes as the primal brain, the primal male brain, the primal female brain, where the female wants the male to lead. And there's a whole dynamic that goes on and all that. That's the way she presents it. And I think there's some merit to what she says. But the key aspect is she teaches what you mentioned here, curiosity. Be curious about what it is that the other person is going to be interested in, how they react. I mean, if it's a more traditional heterosexual male-female kind of thing, and you're a man, know more about how the woman reacts. If you're a woman, know how the man reacts. Learn about because there are certain gender-specific I don't know how to describe it. Reactive tendencies, I guess, is the best way I can describe it. That are valuable for anybody to learn, and I'm willing to bet most of the population doesn't know what they are.
Well, and it's interesting because when you were talking, you're talking about earlier the masculine and feminine energy. Mm-hmm. So when a man is in his masculine energy, he's going to keep a woman, if that's heterosexual, safe, protected. Mm-hmm. He's interested in her. He wants to know about her. Right. He wants her well-being is first and foremost. When a man gives that to a woman, she can now enter her feminine energy.
Yes.
Which is loving, nurturing, caretaking a little bit, sexy, allowing her to step into her power. Mm-hmm. So in men are very visual. You guys see it, you like it, you wanna, that's how you respond. Women, it's more in their mind first. They need to be, courted in their mind. They need to feel, safe. They need to feel turned on there. They need to be known and seen. So it's when you understand the differences and stop. For a long time, I was fighting all of that. I was like, this isn't, I didn't want to know about that. But once I started to learn myself, I'm like, oh, this makes so much more sense on how men and women, gather and date and love and have sex.
It really does. And when you explore through curiosity, that's how you end up with coaches. That's how you end up with more satisfied partners. That's where you end up with a more satisfied self. I mean, everything improves because of that curiosity. Whereas if we come into it with the idea that, oh, well, I know it all, that's a great formula for failure right there.
Well, and it's funny because, Walt, you're coming into a phase now. You're coming out of a long-term relationship. And it's now your turn to play. So you're going to have experiences, what you were maybe lacking in your marriage or what you wanted to explore, and maybe it didn't happen. I was kind of talking about this in my last podcast. It's like, you're the new meat on the market. So
I'm the new meat. Okay.
So,
They used to call it a meat market. Now I understand why. Yeah, okay.
back in the day, right?
Maybe they still do. I don't know. I haven't learned that part yet.
So you want to, that's exactly what you want to do. You want to explore and have fun and have a good time.
I do. But honestly, the bigger draw for me is I liked being in a long-term relationship. That's actually the bigger part. I mean, sex, sure. Yeah. Who's going to turn down sex? But to me, the bigger part is the relationship part. And so that to me is where a lot of the curiosity dynamic comes into it, because I think we have certain assumptions that we make about males and females regarding interest in sex, interest in relationship, interest in the various aspects of what's involved in there. And I'm not so sure that a lot of the stereotypes have been effectively thwarted, effectively, shown for being that they're not all that accurate. There's some degree of accuracy, but they're not all that accurate. I think we still retain some of them.
Well, I think, the movies, Hollywood has done a huge disservice. The White Knight and all of that is just not true. So it doesn't, I wish we would teach more in school on how to have relationships, how to repair with conflict. These are such valuable skills to teach, even for friendships. Every friendship is going to go through trials and tribulations, and every relationship, you want to learn about yourself. Just get into a relationship, especially a romantic one, because that'll excel your growth. That's how we really heal, really is fast. In relationship.
Yeah. Well, either we heal or we crash and burn. I mean, they
yes.
work both ways.
And, you'll see a lot of people just get into the same relationship. They just name the person differently. Yes. It's the same person. So if you don't take a minute to reflect, what is it that I liked about here? What is it that I didn't like about this relationship? What was it that I liked about myself in the relationship? And what can I learn and improve in the relationship? It's really taking the hard look at yourself. And we're not all good at that. We're not really good at self-reflection and being honest with ourselves.
Well, I have to say this audience probably is better than most. I mean, because we do a lot of that, and we reward it in terms of what we talk about here on the show, because, self-improvement is that to me is the foundation for growth, really. I mean, we could also argue that crash and burns are also the foundation for growth, but ultimately it's that willingness to go inside that makes growth happen.
Yes. But here's the other thing. We all think it happens overnight. All of this does not happen overnight.
This is true.
It's not linear. It's a big old spiral, and it goes in many different directions. And sometimes you feel like it's going backwards. And you feel like you're stuck. And I know every time that I don't focus on my personal growth, my life implodes. When I become stagnant and think I've got it all under control, boof, there's go my life. I just blew it up again. So I no longer think like that. I'm a lifelong learner. And see, that's what, my heading to my next relationship, I need a partner that's a lifelong learner. I need somebody who aligns with my values, and who wants to go in the direction I want to go in. Because if you can have good communication, if you can repair your relationship in conflict well, if you can get to your personal traumas, you come together and realize what your childhood traumas are. If you can recognize them and heal them, you can do that together. You can grow your relationship to something spectacular. But it's not easy.
And that reflects back to what you were alluding to earlier, the idea that we bring ourselves with us when we change relationships. So the first relationship is a certain way, and the second relationship is exactly the same way, and the third relationship, we get these patterns going because it's us. We're the common denominator and all.
And you also have to go all the way back to childhood, because your parents were your first models. Now, whether that was good, bad, or indifferent, your parents are your first models. And you really have to take a look at that. What was modeled to you? because they're only modeling what was modeled to them, and probably a little bit of improvement. I know my parents, it was a struggle between them. They had 5 kids. We had addiction, we had abuse, and I was clueless. So I kind of married that until it was good and it was bad in certain parts. And then at 29, I became a widow overnight, and I was given the opportunity, like, okay, what's going on here? And my life, I just wanted to explore. I was curious. I didn't know how to do death. There was so much I didn't know how to do. And I wanted to learn. I consciously chose to learn. I didn't do it all spectacularly well, but now I find in my 60s that I really want to do it with purpose and intention.
Yep, purpose, intention.
I always did it by default. I always managed to get where I was going by default. But this time I want to do it with purpose and intention. And It's interesting. It's really just very interesting to have that type of focus.
You mentioned, too, the parental influence, particularly with our generation. In many cases, the model was not there because parents often just hid the whole thing. So the children had no clue what was going on with any of it. And if there's one thing worse than a bad model, it's no model at all.
Well, we were raised. I'm sorry, Anne-Marie.
No, it's fine. I was just going to say, I had the opposite experience with my parents. Like, I always wanted to marry somebody just like my dad. Oh. He just treated my mum like a queen, and she wasn't always lovely to him. She struggled with things, but their love was just unreal. And even now, she's like end stage Alzheimer's. She's in a home. He still treats her like a queen. Nobody could, like, honestly, if I was in a home and somebody treated me like that, I would just be like, oh, made for life. But that helped me in find my life partner. I've been with like 25 years, definitely my soulmate. We're a team. And I'm very aware of passing that on to my children so that they can see for their future partners. And that, we won't let the kids undermine us. We won't let the kids play us off against each other. We're very much a team. And we'll be like, go on, go to bed, kids. We're going to have a cuddle on the sofa. And we're very open with it. And like, oh no, this is mummy and daddy time. We're just going to chill and watch some telly. I've not seen daddy all week. We've all done this with you. And just very much showing them that, yes, they're very important, but there's also mummy and daddy. And I want them to find relationships like that. So I'm very aware of that parental thing that you mentioned.
That's terrific.
And that's fabulous. I have to tell you, because you've set your family up for success. Where for myself, it was a learning process. It's definitely a learning process, and it's been hard to try to heal that from my parents and, all the shenanigans that went through there. And it was a matter of healing myself and being honest what I was doing and to heal that process. So kudos for you. That's really great.
Yeah,
I had a good role model. I had a good role model.
Really good. Yeah.
I mean, my dad's my hero, but...
Well, that comes through loud and clear. I mean, the fact that he had, first of all, that he has served as such a good role model, and obviously is devoted to your mom through thick and thin. I mean, that's just... I like that on a number of levels, not the least of which is that it is a male. So often men we're kind of, put into a little square box. Like, this is the way all men are. And guess what? Here's one showing you that's not the way it is.
Do you know what? My dad was a Royal Marine, and then he was a policeman, and he would carry my mum's handbag on his shoulder. He wouldn't care. The guy's a legend. Anyway, back to you, Anne. Sorry.
No, that's really great. But, back in our generation, it wasn't done. It wasn't talked about.
Mm.
Feelings, emotions. And I think men have been given a bad rap because, you know, they're to be stoic. They're supposed to be unfeeling and strong. And I really think it's done them a huge disservice.
Yeah, if you want to be weak, follow that prescription.
Yes.
It's not going to make you strong. It's going to be exactly the opposite.
Yes. And
I do think men get a bum deal. There's so much responsibility on men. Don't get me wrong. I think women now in this
It's
day
both
and
ways.
age,
Yeah.
but I think there's a lot of pressure on men in
yes.
a relationship.
Well, we're a confused lot. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
Well, we're
We
very
really are.
complex individuals, aren't we, women?
Yeah.
We
and
don't
vice
always
versa.
know what we want.
But I think men can be the same, but they're just not allowed. They're not allowed to feel. They're not allowed to show. I mean, you guys might feel it internally, but you're certainly not allowed to show it.
Well, actually, you learn not to feel it internally, which is where you run into all the problems.
Yeah.
And then when you start learning to feel it internally, then you have to kind of work through the shame of breaking through, you know, oh, you're not following the stereotype the way you're supposed to. Because it's not just a stereotype, it's kind of societally trained.
Yes. You're not a man.
You're not a real man, right?
You're not a real man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the biggest shocks for me was learning that I didn't have to do all that and I was still masculine. I mean, I'm serious. That was a shock.
Yes.
It was a surprise because I thought I wasn't measuring up.
Yes. I think one of the greatest things is when my partner can sit and cry with me. That I think it is so nourishing for both of us that he can be strong and yet he can show his emotion.
Yeah.
That he feels that safe with me, that we can both do that for each other. That's what's really cool.
Because ultimately we are all human.
Yes.
Despite the gender differences, there's so much in common that we kind of tend to forget that when we're dealing with not just sex, but with relationships, particularly men and women relationships. We get so wrapped up in the masculine feminine thing, and quite understandably, but still we kind of forget we're all human beings.
Yes.
It's not like half of us got, you know, like we missed out on the genetics or something. It's just, that's not the way it works.
But I think, you know, I'm always going back to childhood because it's how we attached with our partners, you know, with our parents, you know, how they attached with us. There's different attachment styles. Anne-Marie, you were given a secure attachment style. So relationships are easy for you. You know, you were given those skills. I'm more anxious because that's how, I see my mother. I see myself and my parents, you know, they were busy doing their thing, raising 5 kids. See, my father had his own business. Children would be seen and not heard. You know, it was the whole thing. So my thing is, you know, abandonment. You know, I can trace it all the way back. So it's up to me. Yes, that was all. I can understand why I do what I do. You know, and I was raised with alcoholic parents. So once I was in the library and you know how you browse the library and what jumps out at you. And it was like, what's it like to be with a relationship with adult child of an alcoholic? I'm like, oh, what's it like to be in a relationship with me? I was in my 30s when I read this, and I read it and I'm like, well, that's a horror, you know. Who wants to be in a relationship with me? You're nuts. So, you know, I knew there was healing that needed to be done. You know, there was like, wow. And it just doesn't stop. But I think for me now, I can acknowledge that. I see how I was raised, but it's now up to me to do the healing. You know, I can remain in victim and blamehood, but I don't want to be there. My parents did what they could do with the skills they had. And that's a very true statement for me. But now it's up to me to heal that and move forward and do a better job.
It's funny. You used the phrase, I haven't heard this one in a long time, but it was very prevalent when we were growing up, those of our generation, children are to be seen and not heard.
Ding, ding.
And there's an adjunct that goes with it, because in my family, we were explicitly taught, no, that's not true. And then they behaved that way anyway. They didn't, it wasn't a deliberate thing. They weren't trying to mess us up. They were behaving the way they had learned how to behave.
Yes.
They were trying to initiate the changes, and they were initiating the changes, but there was a direct conflict in the way they were doing it, purely because they just didn't know any better.
Right.
But from our perspective, I was getting the mixed message of, oh yes, we very much value your input. Now, what were you saying? What was my adult friend over here saying? You know, I get immediately ignored. Like, well, which is it?
Yes. So, but when if you think back, if you kept hearing those type of messages, because from 0 to 7 are the ages that were influenced, you know, our habits and patterns are set. So when you hear those messages, they continue on.
Oh yeah.
And you just don't know it. Like you're still functioning from these statements until you're aware you're no longer functioning from these statements. But it's like, oh, that's why, you know, so it's really just awarenesses. It's self exploration. It's really sitting down with yourself. And, you know, my big thing is when I'm triggered, when I get that emotional charge, it's really not about the other person. It's about me. What is left for me to heal? What is my body trying to tell me? And, you know, it's hard work. It's really hard work taking that look at the mirror, you know, in the mirror and going, and then there's days you're like, God, aren't you pretty? You know, aren't you, you know, you're doing good today. So it's that, you know, you have to be your own cheerleader.
It's also where it's valuable to have that healthy relationship, because if it's truly healthy, then you can be each other's cheerleader as well.
Yes. Yes. Because you want what's best for each other. Mm-hmm. You know, you come together and you're interdependent, but you work toward the whole, like for the relationship. So you're two people working, you know, your individual truths, goals and dreams, and supporting each other in the relationship.
But as Anne-Marie was expressing earlier, she and her partner, they're a team. They are together. It's their journey together. Yes, they have their separate journeys, but they also have their together journey.
And I was just going to comment how you were so strong in spending time with each other.
Yeah.
Like the children, people don't realize that the relationship has to come first. Now, we all know with young children, you have to, you know, you have to use your common sense here. When they're little, they need your attention, but you also have to keep carving out time for each other for that to grow. Because when your children leave, you're left with each other. And this is when I when I did couples coaching, you know, I get them at this point. It's like, who are you? Well, who are you? You know, you're so focused on the children, you've not spent any time with each other. And they don't know each other.
Yeah, and I would also add, though, certainly for us in our relationship, I can't say for everybody, but for us, we also need to have our independent selves. So, like my husband said, you know, he's going out with the boys for a drink or going to watch football, going to play golf or whatever. Is that okay? And it's like, what do you mean, is that okay? Of course. Go is that, you know, if we've got plans or something, then, but you don't have to necessarily ask. We do it out of courtesy, but it's good to have your own time, your own space, your own interests. I mean, things like this, well, my husband thinks it's a bit woo-woo, doesn't really get it, but you know, I don't really get his interest with football, but you know, we go off.
Well, let's be honest, this is a bit woo-woo. I mean, we talk woo-woo. This is a woo-woo show, let's be honest.
I know, but what I'm saying is don't lose yourself within that relationship. We have our separate time. We come together. We're just people. And sometimes I still, 25 years later, look around thinking, I'm sharing this house with this human. And it's really weird. And sometimes it freaks me out a bit.
But I think that's where, you know, in relationships, some women go, they get off track because we're taught, my generation, take care of your man. It's, your man, your man, your man. So you tend to, I watched my mother become resentful because she waited for my father's attention, which it didn't come that often. And she became resentful over that. And that's how I learned to have relationship where I would totally lose myself in it. And it would crash and burn. And I'm like, this is not how it's to be done. And it's
not how it's to be done.
Yeah. And so it's a huge learning curve, on how to.
And that's funny, because I was you just triggered something there for me, because even though, yes, I think I've got a really great foundation with relationships, but how you explained that was how I struggled with friendships. And I really had to learn how to do friendships. And I can pinpoint that back to my childhood and stuff, and I know exactly where it's come from, but I really had to figure out how to be a good friend, how to get good friends. And I was always a rescuer, and then I'd be like, well, why aren't people there for me? And blah, blah, blah. So it's crazy, isn't it? How I can be so solid here, but completely way off here. I love our human race. We're just,
but isn't that what life is, though? If we had all the lessons down, would we not be boring? Wouldn't life be boring if we had nothing to learn?
It would be, but I wouldn't mind boring occasionally.
I totally agree.
I can also point out that despite what Anne-Marie's saying, she's actually a really, really good friend. So I just want to make sure she hears that publicly, because it's true.
She learned.
She is. She has.
I'm learning.
Practice. That's the only way we can do this, is you have to practice.
Mm-hmm.
I think practice, it's also important to appreciate too, because it's so easy for us to make progress in a certain area and not give ourselves credit for it.
Absolutely. Gratitude. Sometimes you have to look back to where you were, to where you are, because when you're in the pile of distress, you're in it. You can't see behind you. You can't see ahead of you. You're just in it. But I have a saying, my level of discomfort is my level of growth.
Yes.
So I know, yes, I know eventually I'm going to come out of this. And it's going to be something spectacular. Like for myself, the last year, I really just kind of isolated. I needed to take myself to the next level. I needed to figure out where I'm going next in my life. I learned tapping, EFT, emotional freedom technique. And I took, to release, I knew it was time to release my trauma somatically. I did a lot of it through talk therapy, but it was the body that's holding on. And with EFT, my God, what a fabulous skill. I was able to release on a different level and give myself the time to do that. And that meant just stepping back from friendships, from, my work life. It just meant spending time with myself. And it was about a year that I kind of did this. I would go, interact a little bit, but come back, do more healing. And then, December was really, really crappy for me. I had a brother-in-law die. I strained my back, and I ended with COVID. And I was like, okay, universe, I get it. I get what you're trying to tell me. It was just, again, time to feel, heal. And now I feel I'm ready. 2023 is purpose and intention. And now I'm going to attack. Now I'm really going to go after what I want.
I'm sitting here thinking about the range of conversation we've had here. We started off pretty much talking about sex, and now we're talking about personal development and relationships, which shows that they're all interconnected. But it also kind of shows something else too, and it just kind of hit me, because we mentioned earlier how we don't talk easily about sex, and we don't it's not a social conversation. It's not often even a conversation within a primary relationship. And we just demonstrated here. We started talking about sex and then we kind of got away from it. And we stayed away from it.
Well, you know what? But I think in order to talk about sex, we have to have these type of conversations. People have to feel comfortable. You get to know one another. And now we can bring it back to talk more about it. But I think you have to have that foundation within yourself to be able to talk about sex.
Yeah, because what you're really talking about is self-confidence at that point.
Yeah. Yeah.
But also, if I'm like, if I think my husband's being an idiot for some reason, which is clearly not down to myself, I'm joking. But I don't, if I don't feel that connection.
I was waiting for that other shoe to drop right there.
If I don't feel connected with him, or if we're having you haven't done the washing, or you haven't done the dishes and that kind of thing, last thing I want to do is have sex with him. You've got to be on that same wavelength. You've got to have that connection, I think.
Yes, it's a choice. Every day it's a choice to be in that relationship. So you can either focus on the little things. Oh, you didn't do the dishes. You didn't do the laundry. You didn't. Or you can really focus on what did he do? What do you do? What does your partner do well? Because if you focus on those things, that's what keeps you connected. 100%. It's the Gottmans talk about, they have a great little book that just came out, I can't remember titles, but it's really a little guidebook, and it's about bids for connection. When your partner, that's how people stay in long-term relationships, is when your partner turns towards you and wants to connect. And it could be the simplest little thing that they look at this she gives the example, look at this bird out here that I'm looking at. He can sit there and do what he's doing and go, or he can get up and say, let me look at the bird with you. And that's the bid. That's the connection. And that's what's successful. But when you turn away from your partner stops turning towards you when they keep hearing no, no, no. So it's what you do right. It's not always what you do wrong. What does he do right? What does he do to please you? And if you focus on that, and I think you have, Anne-Marie, what he's done well more than what he's not done well.
Yeah. Which fits, because that's not just going to be with sex. It's going to be with life in general. What we give our attention to, we're going to get more of. So if we give our attention to stuff that we're going to be critical of, we're going to get more opportunities to feel critical. It's not going to be that's not exactly going to be putting you in the mood. That's going to be in the mood for, let's find something else to complain about.
Right.
Right? That's just the way the human psychology works, the way the universe works. Whereas when we switch it around, flip it around, and start focusing on what we appreciate, what feels good, what we like, what we enjoy, then guess what? We're going to find more of what we like and enjoy and what feels good.
Yes. And isn't that the practice of gratitude, right?
That's
when
right.
We're all grateful, for what we have, what we feel, what we do. We get more of that.
Isn't that amazing?
Now, Anne, I've got a question. I might be going off course here, but what have you noticed an impact with technology and what that's had with relationships? Because mobile phones, I just think they're detrimental sometimes. They're brilliant in some aspects, but I just think, people are stuck to their phones and they're not communicating on a sort of more human level. So have you noticed that impact in relationships?
Yes. And I think our younger generation is really, really suffering from that. Us older ones, we still want to, I want to talk on the phone. I like texting, don't get me wrong, but I want to connect. I want to talk on the phone. I want to talk in person. Our younger generation just does it all through texting. And their conversations are harder for them to have because they do it just through texting. But it was funny. I was in the chiropractor's office this morning. There were 6 of us. We were all on our phones, and I put mine away, and I'm watching them now. Everybody's on their phone. Nobody's looking at each other. And I'm just like, wow, look what's happening here. Here's a bunch of strangers, and nobody's paying attention to anybody.
I can't blame that on the phone, though.
Yeah.
Because that's been around since long before phones. The only difference was instead of looking at the phone, we just looked at the wall, or we looked at the highlights magazine that was on the table, or we read the time, or we just ignored the other people. It's just now we have an excuse to ignore them because we're looking at our phones.
Yeah. But I do. But if you watch families, I watch families out. Everybody's on their their phones, and people aren't having conversations, and it can be detrimental. It really can to the relationship. Even watching TV, when you sit and you just, your partner wants to have a conversation and you just want to watch TV. It's hard.
I honestly, I'm going to go back to what I was just saying, because I think it's an important thing here. I honestly believe the younger generation get a bad rap because of the phones thing. I really do. Because I think what's really happening there is the older generation projecting. And the reason I say that is not that the older generation uses their phones all the time, but I'll give you an example, because I've been exploring the dating world, so I've been having to explore how dating apps work. Oh my God, that's a whole universe. We should probably do a show on that sometime. But when you actually are dealing with real human beings and not dealing with all the other crap that's out there, even then, it's interesting how often I encounter women who say things in their profiles and so forth, like they want to have real communication. They're not, enough of this texting and so forth. And then when it comes to actually interacting, they're the first ones to ghost you. Now, if anyone can explain that to me, I would appreciate it. But from where I'm sitting, this demonstrates pretty clearly it's not the phone.
Well, that happens on both ends, though.
It does, I'm sure.
On both ends. People don't realize that and these dating apps, I want to spend 1 or 2, just maybe a week back and forth. Then let's get on it. Now that we're going to meet, we're going to move this along. And people, I don't know if they're the realization that that's going to happen, or they're just not real on their end. I don't really know.
Well, part of it, I know there is an ethic that I'm still learning, but there is an ethic to how you use an app. And one of the aspects of that ethic is if you want to break off a conversation, you just stop talking. Now, from my perspective, this is one of the things that I think our generation did well before technology to a certain extent. From my perspective, if you wanted to end the conversation, you say something nice and you move on. Mm-hmm. But that seems to have fallen by the wayside. And I'm not talking about among younger people. I'm talking about the older people.
Yes.
So again, that's why I say, how much of this complaining about what's going on with the younger is projection? Because it's not like the older people have really got it better in terms of how they're doing it. They're doing a little bit different. Maybe their noses aren't as buried in it, but it's not like they've demonstrated tremendous skill as far as I'm concerned.
No, the internet, but see, that's the thing with all of this. It's given license to people to have bad behavior. They've forgotten their manners. I mean, I'm still one of the ones that'll be like, I don't feel this is going anywhere. Thank you for the conversation. Good luck to you.
Yeah.
Because I like to finish things, that goes back to my abandonment issues. So I like to be polite and nice. I don't always get that back though. Then you get called names, and it's interesting, the behaviors, but it's given people, I think sometimes we have too many choices and anonymity to have bad manners, because you'll never meet this person. So what does it really matter? And that's sad.
I can also take the other side of it too, because I can understand now why it is that so many people have the bad manners, as we're labeling them, because it can get to the point where you're inundated. I mean, that's part of, if you're on an app that's introducing you to a lot of people, you have a lot of conversations that you're trying to respond to. It's not like when you're at a party, you can just walk over to the bar or something. I mean, they're just right there on the phone, And
Yes.
how are you, and I can see where it becomes very tempting to just say, screw it, I'm going to ignore the whole thing. I can't deal with it right now. I can't handle all that.
Well, that's why every now and then you take a break. You're like, okay, I need some time out from this process and regroup. Yeah, it's an adventure. It's an adventure.
It's a new world is what it is. Yeah.
Well, good
It
luck
really
to
is. I'm actually exploring the more conventional ways. I think I'm going to do better there, to be perfectly honest. Somehow the old fashioned still has an appeal for me, I guess I'll say. But anyway.
It's what's familiar, it's what we're familiar with.
Yeah. Yeah, it's familiar. I honestly think, though, it's more effective. I mean, I get the value of having the technology, but I still have resistance to doing all this text exchanges when I'm trying to find somebody, because I get so much of my signals from visual cues and body languages and so forth. And there's none of that, unless they put an emoji in, there is none of that in text
Yes.
messaging. And I'm supposed to try to figure out who this person is from the text. Like, you got to be kidding me.
You lose
Well,
so
I couldn't read
much.
the profile, I'd be like, oh,
yeah, you lose so much in that process.
You do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of misunderstandings. It can be a problem. Yeah. That's why I don't like texting that long. It's like, I'm going to move this along. If we're not going to move it along, then they don't want what I want. And that's okay.
It's very interesting stuff all the way around.
Yeah.
This has been a very interesting conversation. We've kind of gone all over the place, but you know what? We're basically covering the whole topic, which is really what you're all about. You're about love and life coaching, and we've covered the love part, but we've also covered the life part too. So this has been really, really good. Now you have that video that's going to be coming out. When do you know what the release date's going to be on that?
I don't. I'm hoping for early spring, if not before, but that's my deadline is springtime. So it's exciting.
Yeah, that's great. It's always fun when you're working on a project like that, and there is an excitement involved. Yeah,
yes.
No doubt. For somebody who wants to learn more about what you offer as a coach, and I'm not even sure what else you have because we really didn't get into that very much, but how do they find out more about Ann Bell?
They can visit my website, aconfidentialconversation.com.
Okay. What are some of the things they're going to find there?
I have my blog post there. I have all of my packages, what I kind of do there. So, you can read about me.
Okay. That's fair enough. And let's see. There is one other thing I need to share too. And Anne-Marie knows that I've been doing this now for about 6-7 months because I realized a while back that this is like a need that has not been filled. So I'm trying to do my part to fill it because so many people come onto the show like yourself who are basically givers. They're just trying every which way they can to give to people, both through their business practices, but also through outreach, through like podcasts and blog posts and things like that. And the net result is we're putting out this content. You're putting out content. We're putting out content. Lots of people are putting out content, and there are people benefiting from it. And we never meet them. We never see them. We don't know who they are, and yet they benefit. And I think it deserves recognition. So on behalf of all the people who you've never met, you've never seen, who've seen your blog posts, they've read your stuff, they're going to be watching your video, all that kind of thing, and they've gotten something out of it. On their behalf, thank you for what you've been doing and for what you're continuing to do.
Thank you. My pleasure.
I like that. Nice, short, concise appreciation. That's really good. Anything last from you, Anne-Marie, before we wrap up?
No, that was just a beautiful conversation. Thank you very much, Anne, and it's been lovely to meet you.
Oh, you too, guys. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Definitely a pleasure to have you as well. Thank you to our podcast listeners everywhere. We'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.